Hello, my name is Aditya. I'm an ex-Meta software engineer, and today I wanted to do a little workshop to kind of teach more advanced vibe coding users how to move past basic platforms like Lovable or V0 and make the jump to Cursor. So what this workshop is going to cover is how to create a basic project with Cursor, how to set up source control, and then how to deploy this project to the internet. So we'll start by making a new project within Cursor. What I want to do is just make a folder to contain this project, and we'll just call this Context Crafter. So now that we're in Cursor, let me explain a little bit more about what Cursor is. Cursor is an IDE, that means Integrated Development Environment, and it kind of brings in everything you need into one place. So this is going to be your file browser. You'll see once we create some files, they'll all show up here. There's additional tabs here like search, git, that kind of stuff. We'll get into that later. This is going to be your agent chat. So this will allow you to, interface with the AI models and have them work on whatever you tell them. And then within Cursor, we have a lot of different things, like here's your terminal, which will come in handy later when we're starting the server and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and kick this project off. So one thing that's kind of different within Cursor as opposed to something like Lovable or V0 is that it's very open-ended, right? You could create any kind of project you want. And so because of that, you need to be specific in certain ways. And so, we want to make a website during this tutorial, but even if you tell it I want to make a website as opposed to like a desktop app, it could choose a million different frameworks, and you might find out later that this isn't really what you wanted. So for now, let's go ahead and specify using Next.js. Another thing that is really useful for Cursor and vibe coding in general is using text to speech. And so what I use is Whisperflow, but there's plenty of alternatives out there. So here we go. I want to create a website. Help me set up the project. We're going to be using the Next.js framework. Here are some of the features I want implemented. And so that's a good starter prompt. Obviously, we'll need to give it some features. And so, this is where you use your creativity and what kind of website are you dreaming of. For now, I've kind of already thought of some features ahead of time, and I'll just copy paste those in, and we'll see what it does. So the basic idea is it's going to be a context crafter that helps you create quality prompts. Pretty basic project, but should be interesting. So go ahead and ask the Cursor agent to start. And so here is where you can select the models. If you turn off the auto picker, I really like Claude 4.5, GPT-5-High, and Opus 4.1 is pretty good as well, though I usually use that within Claude Code. For now, we'll just use it on auto. Here you can select agent, plan mode, background, ask. And so if we wanted to, we could go ahead and use a plan first instead of having it do everything. That way it'll kind of think through what it needs to do beforehand. In fact, let's go ahead and do that now. Let's make a plan to create a project. And so here we can see that it's going to go ahead and ask you some questions rather than just diving in and creating the project, which is what you want. And so go ahead and tell it use Tailwind, TypeScript, client side for now, and for cell deployment. And we'll get into the deployment stuff later. And so here's the plan that it comes up with. This will usually take a minute. And then once you're done creating the plan, you can approve it and it'll go off and start building it. You see this plan is just a markdown file, which is a text file with some syntax. and you can view it as it writes. And here you'll see the to-dos for the agent. So we'll go ahead and ask it to build it. So, I mean, a lot of this is just waiting for the agent to kind of do its thing, right? I'll say it's very driven and can work on a lot of things by itself independently, but sometimes it'll go off the rails and you'll need to stop it, correct it. And that's something that kind of just comes with time. Like, if you see it's deleting a lot of your code base in the edits, yeah, you should probably stop it and see what's going on. Or if you see that it's repeatedly running into bugs or issues and it can't get past them, then you'll also want to stop it and see what's going on. So here we see that it's trying to run these commands and it's asking for approval. So that's a feature of Cursor where certain commands are approved, certain commands are allowed, and certain commands they'll ask you for. So see what's there. And then here, as I mentioned earlier, this is the file browser. So you'll see the files be populated here as the agent creates them. And of course, you can read and edit the files manually. Looks like it's still going. You'll see there's plenty of to-dos here. So a little bit more about the model selection. So I find that GPT-5 High is really good for debugging specific problems and things that really require deep investigation. Claude is really good for building front end, doing the designs, that kind of stuff. General, Claude is my go-to model. I'll switch to GPT-5 if I feel like there's a problem that's super difficult or something. But there's new models all the time coming out all the time, and that's the nice part of Cursor. You get access to all the models in one IDE as opposed to Claude Code, where you can really only use Claude unless you modify it. See here, it's actually actively editing the files. Come back to this once it's done creating all this. Okay, looks like it's finally done. So we can go ahead and just read what it's done. Looks like it tried to build, fix some errors. And this is the critical part. So you'll see that it has started this dev server here. And so it's something you kind of got to keep track of. If you want to view your website, you'll need to start the dev server locally, and it'll auto-update anytime you make any changes. And so you can see that it's actually started the dev server itself, and we can click on that and open it. Okay, so as we can see here, it started the server, and usually to access this, there'll be localhost 3000 or 3001. You'll see it in whatever the agent says. And so here's the website that it created from our prompt and plan. So we can click around. And as you can see, there's already a little bit of an issue. It looks like there's some text that's supposed to be prompting the user, but it's impossible to see. So here's where a lot of your time will be spent in just back and forth and fixing these little issues and bugs. So what I like to do is just take a screenshot, go into Cursor, and simply just attach the screenshot to the chat, and then describe the issue as well. Again, using text-to-speech. There's very poor text contrast here in the questionnaire page. And hopefully it'll go and fix that. And so the dev server is also where this terminal stuff comes in. As you can see, the Cursor agent has started the dev server in its own terminal that the agent is controlling. And you'll actually see as it makes edits, the dev server will pick up the changes and refresh the page. So here you can see it's making the edits, and if we go back, it's already looking better. So, go ahead and go through that and make sure you're happy with the way your app is working. Another quick concept that I'll cover is the .env file. And so this is something you just got to be aware of. This is going to be where your API keys are going to live. And so, for example, it could be open AI API key, whatever it ends up being. And so this would be something that your agent will give you instructions on how to set up if it's needed. For example, you're using AI in your project, you're probably going to need some kind of API key. And these are supposed to be secret. Don't share them with anyone. Don't include them in source control, because if they get leaked, anyone can use your resources. So, yeah. And here we go. We're seeing, going back to what the agent is doing, looks like there's actually an error. And so, and if we go back to our web page, this is local internal server error. So when this happens, just tell the agent, hey, there's an error. And so the agent should have the access to the terminal and should be able to read these errors. But, we'll just point out, looks like there's an error in the terminal. And so, the correct fix in this case is going to be just simply to restart the terminal. We'll see if the agent is smart enough to figure that out. Yep, it's going to clear the cache and restart the server. So, if we refresh, should see it working. Oh, looks like it's not working. Interesting. So, sometimes you got to fix these manually too. So I'll show you right here what we'd do. So we're just going to close these terminals. Yeah, there's the issue. It opened a new one, port 3002. So if you just come in and click on this, you can open it. And here we go. Our app is working, and the contrast issues have been fixed. So next we're going to talk about source control. So now, just assume we have our project at a state where we're pretty happy with it. We want to, back it up and make sure that any future changes we make can be reverted. And so, a quick thing, let's just create a new chat. Anytime you're working on, a new concept, a new feature, or something different, you want to make a new chat to basically clear the context. Your old chat is still there, you can still access it if needed, but the longer the chat goes on, the more the context of the agent will get filled up, which is just going to lead to worse performance. And so something you'll need for this next part is you'll need the Git installed on your system, it's a CLI tool, and you'll also need the GitHub CLI tool installed. I also recommend using GitHub Desktop. That's probably the most user-friendly way to play around with these Git repos. So let's just tell the agent what we're trying to do here. I need to set up a Git repository for my project. Let's go ahead and set up the local Git repo as well as a remote on github.com using the GitHub CLI tool. And so let's see if the agent can take care of that for us. And so, a local Git repository is going to allow, keep your changes local. You can still revert, but it's not going to be backed up anywhere. If you lose your computer, it's all going to be gone. So that's why we want to also make something on github.com, make a repository there. That'll also help us when we deploy. So you can see you'll need to know the basic Git concepts, but you can simply just ask the agent what they are. So We'll just watch it run through this. And so, to briefly explain the basic concepts of Git, we have what are called commits. So anytime you make some changes, you'll kind of save them together and commit them. And so that commit will contain all your changes, and it'll just be, you can view the list of commits and revert to a specific commit. We also have the concept of branches. And so what branches are, basically your main or master branch is going to be, like the title implies, the master branch that your live version of your website is going to reflect on. Then you'll have typically a dev branch or feature branches, which contain the specific changes required for a feature. And so eventually what you'll be doing is merging those changes in using what's called a pull request, and you can ask the agent to open pull requests for you using the GitHub CLI tool, and you can also ask it to work on GitHub branches. But for now, if it's just your own project, you can work on Git master branch. And as always, you can ask the agent throughout every step, hey, just explain what you're doing, I'm new to this, and it'll be more than happy to talk you through any changes. So it looks like what it's done. It's made a Git repository locally, create an initial commit. It's created a remote repository, and it's made it public, which is certainly an interesting choice. And if you go ahead and go to this URL, you can view all your code there. So we can now view our repository here. This is going to contain all the code. And what I would probably do if this was a serious project was make this repository private. So just go to the settings menu and change repository visibility. So now that leads us to our next step, which is going to be deploying the project and putting it out on the web for others to access. So for that, we're going to use Vercel, which is a hosting service. And I'm going to go ahead and click New Project, import the GitHub repository. You'll have to connect it to your GitHub if you haven't already done it. And go ahead and just click Deploy. And here you'll see that the deployment will queue up. And so anytime you push changes to this GitHub repository, Vercel is going to automatically deploy those changes. So I'll show you how to make changes to the project in just a minute, but we'll see that here it's completing the initial deployment. And if this doesn't work, if there's some errors here, you can copy paste these errors back into the agent and just tell it, hey, I tried to deploy and this is what happened. Usually takes a minute. Looks like it's deploying now. Here we go. And so this will be the Vercel dashboard for the app. And we can view that our app is now live on the internet. That's pretty crazy that that's really all it took. A couple of prompts and a couple of clicks, and we've made a website. And so for the final part of this project, just show you how to create any changes and push any updates. And so all we really have to do is we can say, make a new chat and think of some changes that you want to make. So for example, I'll just say, we'll just remove the business and strategy section as an example. So just tell it, so it'll go through, make the changes that you request, and this local dev server will automatically update, so you're able to see your changes locally when you go to that localhost URL. And then once you are done with the changes, what you can do is just tell it to commit and push. And so what this will do is committing is, like I mentioned earlier, it's kind of putting the changes into GitHub, and then pushing will push our changes to that remote repository in github.com. And so once you do that, Vercel will see that there have been changes in the repository. It'll automatically pick those up and automatically deploy those. So yeah, that is all you need to vibe code your first app using Cursor, Vercel, and Next.js. And I know this is definitely a lot more complicated than just using Lovable or V0, but ultimately this allows you so much more control over your app and be so much more precise in making changes. And the biggest thing for me is being able to select different models within Cursor so I can work on different problems in different ways. So yeah, if you have any questions, just drop them in the comments. Hope you enjoyed this. Thank you.